We saw a figure far ahead, but it moved like it was glitching. The trail narrowed as the sun dipped behind the hills, and fog began to crawl along the forest floor, pooling between the roots of twisted oaks and firs. My boots sank slightly in damp soil, and every step felt heavier, as though the woods themselves were pressing down. The air carried a damp sweetness, overlaid with the metallic tang of moss and decomposing leaves, and it was hard to tell where the trail ended and the forest began. I slowed my pace, feeling the tension in my shoulders tighten. Behind me, Alex's voice was low, nervous. "Did you see that?" he asked, though I hadn't moved my eyes from the path ahead. There it was again, a figure, just a shadow at first, standing between two bent pines maybe 50 meters away. It seemed to shimmer, like a poorly rendered image, then jerked forward in a series of stutters that made my stomach churn. 1 second it was mid-step, the next it had snapped closer, limbs bending at angles that no human joint should allow. "Stay calm," I whispered, though my own voice trembled. "It's probably just, I didn't know what, hiker, hunter, maybe a trick of the fog. But it wasn't human. Not truly." The figure froze, then started again, its motion jerky, almost digital in cadence. For a moment, it seemed to pause midair, its foot hovering above the ground before snapping down with an audible thunk that echoed in the damp silence. My mind tried to rationalize it, tried to cling to logic, but each twitch and skip tore at my reason. Sometimes its head would rotate, not in a natural turn, but as if someone were dragging a cursor across a 3D model, snapping from one angle to the next. Alex gripped my arm, whispering, "It's like it's broken." I wanted to laugh, wanted to shake off the creeping panic, but the forest seemed to lean closer with each passing second. The trees' trunks bent toward us subtly, almost imperceptibly, their branches weaving over the trail to form a tunnel of warped wood and shadow. Shadows didn't match the moonlight. They slithered along the bark, sometimes stretching longer than the branches should allow, sometimes pooling beneath nothing at all. We pressed forward, each step measured and slow, but the figure didn't retreat. It didn't advance steadily either. It seemed to phase in and out, sometimes flickering at the edge of visibility, then solidifying just long enough for a shudder to run through me. Its limbs were human-shaped, yes, but elongated, compressed, twisting in ways that mocked anatomy. At one point, its arm bent backward, and I swore I saw the joints snap like glass before straightening again. I felt the forest around us begin to thrum, subtly at first, a vibration underfoot that I couldn't tell was sound or sensation. The fog thickened, rising to our knees, then to our waists, carrying with it the faintest whisper of voices, or maybe just the memory of voices, as if the mist itself remembered people who had walked here long before us. Time fractured. My watch had stopped at 1847, then jumped to 1912 when I glanced at it again, and Alex swore he had heard birds call at midnight, though it was barely dusk. Each step we took seemed to both elongate and collapse the trail. Routes that we had passed reappeared. Trees shifted subtly, forming new angles, new obstacles that hadn't been there moments ago. I realized, with a cold jolt, that the forest wasn't merely alive. It was aware. And the figure ahead, it was aware too. It mimicked us. Every pause we took, every glance over our shoulder, it mirrored. Not perfectly, there were skips, jerks, microsecond delays, but it copied gestures, head tilts, even the way we breathed. And sometimes it multiplied. I could swear I saw two shapes where there had only been one, then three, before the fog erased all but one again. Alex's flashlight flickered. When it stabilized, the figure was closer. It hadn't walked. It had blinked into position, half solid, half shimmering. The air felt charged, as though static ran through the fog, and a low, resonant hum vibrated in my chest. It wasn't music. It wasn't language. It was something older, something patient, waiting. I wanted to scream, to turn and run, but my feet felt fused to the trail. And then the smell hit me. A metallic, earthy scent, like iron and wet stone, like the forest had bled itself into the soil. The figure paused again, and I realized it was staring at us, though its face offered no features. Only the suggestion of a head, smooth and dark, reflecting the dim light in shards. Suddenly, it jerked. Then another, smaller figure blinked into existence beside it, moving with the same stuttering, unnatural grace. And then another, and another, until the trail ahead seemed crowded with flickering shadows, each one imperfect, echoing human form but breaking the rules of motion. Alex whispered something incomprehensible. I didn't hear him, couldn't. The forest was alive now in a way I couldn't place. The ground pulsed, leaves rustled without wind, and the fog moved against its own currents, curling around us like hands. I understood, somewhere deep in my chest, that the figure had never been alone. It had never been singular. It was the forest or something ancient beneath it, taking shapes from memory and fracture, from the echoes of those who had walked this trail before, or who had been lost to it entirely. We moved or thought we moved, but time split us from our own steps. A second, a minute, an hour passed simultaneously, folded into itself. I blinked, and the figures were not ahead. They were everywhere. Flickering between trees, in the shadows behind us, in the fog before us, bending reality until the path itself was uncertain. I realized then that the glitching motion was not malfunction. It was truth made visible. The forest, the figures, even ourselves, it was all a pattern being rewritten, a loop we had stumbled into. And the figures weren't just mimicking, they were learning. I felt a presence behind me, too vast for a single body, like the forest itself was breathing down my spine. I dared not look. Alex's voice cracked. We shouldn't. But the words were swallowed by a stutter in the air, as if sound had become fragile, breaking between beats of time. When I turned, I saw nothing. Or rather, I saw too much. The trail unraveling into impossible angles, trees bending in hyperbolic curves, the fog thick with countless shadowed forms that weren't quite ours, weren't quite solid. Each step we took only brought us deeper into it, a fractal of fear that multiplied endlessly. I ran, or I thought I ran. The forest dissolved behind me, the trail folding in on itself, the fog devouring every reference point. Every time I thought I escaped, I was confronted with the same glitching figures, their stutters and jerks growing faster, more confident, echoing human motion with increasing perfection. I don't know how long I ran. Time became meaningless. My lungs burned, my mind splintered, and the forest's pulse was inside me now. And then I heard it, laughter or the memory of laughter, but fractured, overlapping, impossibly many. I tripped over nothing, or perhaps over a root that hadn't existed a moment before. When I forced myself to look up, I realized the figure or the figures were no longer just ahead. They were behind, beside, within the fog itself, eyes or facsimiles of eyes, tracking every breath. They blinked, skipped, teleported, bent, multiplied. And then I understood the final, unthinkable truth. The glitching was not a symptom. It was the forest, the figures, reality itself beginning to fracture. And we were inside it. The last thing I remember before the trail swallowed me completely was the sound of 1,000 stutters, all in unison, moving closer, merging, and the cold certainty that if one figure existed, then countless others had always existed, and now so had we. The woods were patient. The glitching figures were patient, and I was already too late. Something whispered directions from the darkness. I had been following the trail for hours or maybe minutes. It was impossible to tell. The forest had swallowed the sun long ago, leaving a deep, creeping fog that curled through the undergrowth like smoke. My boots sank into spongy moss, the sound muffled under layers of decayed leaves, but other noises, snap of twig, scrape of bark, echoed unnaturally, too far and too close at once. It started as a murmur, a hissing voice just beyond the reach of my peripheral hearing. I froze, straining to listen. Left? No, right? Past the roots? It whispered, too soft to be certain if it was real, yet undeniably articulate. My heart thrummed in my chest. The words didn't feel like guidance. They felt like a suggestion, tentative, coaxing me. And yet I obeyed. The trail bent unnaturally, as though the forest itself were reweaving it. forcing me past trees that shouldn't intersect, around roots that shouldn't exist. Branches scraped at my face like fingers. The fog thickened until the world beyond my flashlight's beam was a shifting wall of gray. I realized with a cold stab of panic that the trees ahead looked eerily familiar, like I had passed them already, but that was impossible. Or at least it should have been. Step lightly, the voice whispered again, now closer, almost beneath the skin. There was a cadence to it, deliberate, like it was learning me, probing the rhythm of my breathing, the way I hesitated, the shape of my fear. Past the hollow, follow the curve. I obeyed, feeling the forest pulse around me. Moss quivered as I passed. Roots shifted underfoot. Shadows moved counter to the moonlight, growing and shrinking in ways my mind refused to rationalize. And then I caught it. The landscape itself wasn't fixed. The trail twisted backward just slightly, a bend I didn't remember, a hollow that had shifted closer to where I now stood. I stopped. My breath came in harsh, panicked gasps. "Who's there?" I demanded, the words hoarse, swallowed almost immediately by the fog. Only silence answered. And then, just behind me, the whisper returned. "Do not stop. Step into the hollow." The hollow was nothing more than a depression in the earth, too steep and smooth to be natural. I hesitated, and the whisper sharpened, a hiss threaded with amusement or mockery. "You know the way. You just need to trust." I did not trust, and yet, step by step, I obeyed. My hands brushed against trees with bark that was too slick, almost wet, as if the forest were sweating. Leaves moved against me with no breeze. The fog closed behind me, leaving no trail. I stumbled, almost falling, and the voice chuckled, soft and dry, as if tasting my fear. Time began to fracture. My watch had stopped when I first entered the hollow, hands frozen at 22:17. When I glanced down again, it read 21:03, then 23:45, and finally 22:59. Seconds stretched into hours, or maybe collapsed into moments. Every step I took seemed to echo backward, forward, sideways. The forest had grown taller, the trees bending inward, weaving together to form tunnels that whispered. I realized I could not mark my passage. I could not remember which path I had chosen. All paths looked identical and alien, coiled in impossible angles. "Do not fear the shadows," the voice whispered, low now, almost intimate, as if leaning into my ear. "They are your friends. They are learning your shape." The shadows were learning me. I saw fragments of myself in them. Limbs too long, faces stretched, crouching figures that mimicked my posture before snapping back to the fog. At first I thought it was exhaustion, hallucination. Then I understood. The forest was alive, watching, waiting, and I was no longer the observer. I was a participant in some slow, deliberate ritual. I tried to resist the whisper, to find my own path, but the voice anticipated me. Each deviation was met with gentle correction. Left, follow the curve. Step lightly. And every correction led me deeper, into areas where the fog thickened and the trees warped beyond geometry I could comprehend. Roots spiraled toward the sky. Branches bent like inverted claws, dripping black resin that smelled of wet iron and decay. Occasionally, I would glimpse figures in the mist, not fully formed but hints. A silhouette that bent wrong at the knees, a hand stretching impossibly long, a head tilting in a way that mocked human anatomy. They did not move independently. They mirrored me, anticipating my actions, as if the forest were sculpting a copy of me from the shadows themselves. I stumbled again, almost falling into a depression in the ground. When I righted myself, I realized the hollow had grown, expanding unnaturally, swallowing the fog, and the trees had retracted, forming a dome of warped wood. My flashlight flickered and died. Total darkness pressed in. The whisper was right there, inside my mind now. "Do you see it? The way is clearer now." Step, step, step. Step by step, I obeyed, my feet sinking into earth that was no longer solid. The fog began to carry voices. Not words, not language, but the memory of language, twisted, overlapping. Echoes of people I had never met, sentences half-formed, laughter, sobs, sighs, cries of warning, all blending into a hum that pressed into my skull. I understood then that the forest was conscious. It had been conscious for eons, and it had not forgotten us. The whisper was older than memory, older than the trail. It had walked here before me, memorized every hesitation, every gesture, and now it was teaching me to follow, to submit, to dissolve. Hours passed, or seconds. When the whisper softened, almost, you are ready. I turned a corner of twisted roots and saw a pool of black water. Reflected in its surface was not my face, but a flickering, fractured version. Long limbs, twisted features, shadows twitching just beneath the surface. And surrounding it were countless impressions of figures, crouched, kneeling, folding, broken forms, all mimicking me in ways that should have been impossible. I wanted to run, but the voice whispered again, tender and cruel. You cannot leave. You are learning the way. You will remember the way. And then it will remember you. The forest shifted. The hollow swallowed the trail behind me. I realized there was no exit. The whispers were all directions now, leading me deeper, spiraling, fracturing, until I could not distinguish beginning from end, self from shadow, reality from imitation. I fell to my knees, exhausted, and the whispers softened into a lullaby of sorts, coaxing, teaching. Do not fear. Step lightly, follow. And I did, step after step into darkness that felt alive, that watched, that remembered everything about me. I do not know how long I have been here. Days, minutes, years? Time has no meaning. The forest knows me, anticipates me, sculpts me. The whisper is patient, eternal. And now it is learning the shapes of new arrivals, waiting to teach them the way I learned, the way we all must. The last coherent thought I remember: the directions are not leading out. They are leading in, deeper, into something vast, ancient, and endlessly hungry. And I am already part of it. Something whispered directions from the darkness. And I am still following.